She asked me to stay the night, and I told her I wasn't sleeping on the sofa. That one sentence, those 9 words, I had no idea they would crack open something neither of us was ready to name. My name is Jordan Hayes. I am 27 years old and I work as a software developer at a mid-sized tech company in Seattle. My days look the same most of the time. Wake up, commute, sit in front of a screen for 8 to 10 hours, come home, eat whatever is fastest and do it again. The city is beautiful if you stop long enough to look at it.
Irerlido.
Work has a way of eating the parts of your life you forget to protect. The office is all clean lines and glass walls. It looks impressive from the outside. From the inside, it is the kind of place that rewards you for being sharp and punishes you for being soft. People there are polite but careful, friendly but guarded. You learn quickly not to need too much from anyone. Except I needed Claire. Not in the way I wanted to need her, not at first. Claire Weston is my team lead. She is 31, composed in a way that feels earned rather than performed, and fast in a way that makes everyone around her sharper just by being in the room. She has this quality where she can look at a broken system, a broken plan, or a broken person and figure out exactly what is missing without making you feel stupid for missing it yourself. She brought me onto the team 2 years ago when I was newer and quieter and far less sure of myself than I let on. She never treated me like I was behind. She never sighed when I asked a question. When a deployment fell apart at 11 at night and the whole team was tense and exhausted, she would crack one small joke and somehow the room would breathe again. When I worked through lunch 3 days in a row without noticing, a snack would appear on my desk. No note, no comment, just there. I told myself we were just close colleagues. Then I told myself we were friends. Good friends. The kind of friends who text each other about nothing and make each other laugh in the middle of terrible meetings. I tried very hard to keep the line there. My heart had other plans. That particular Friday, Seattle had been gray and heavy from the moment I woke up. By midday, the clouds were sitting so low they looked like they were resting on top of the buildings. Most of the office cleared out by 4:30, people rushing to beat the rain. I stayed late to check one last thing, the way I always do, hearing Claire's voice in my head reminding me to test twice before a weekend. When I finally shut my laptop and grabbed my bag, the building felt hollow. The lights hummed louder without voices to soften them. I rode the elevator down alone and walked toward the lobby doors. That is when I saw her. Claire was standing near the entrance, one hand holding her phone, the other pressed flat against the glass, watching the rain like she was trying to decide something. Her warm auburn hair was loose around her shoulders, a few damp strands sticking to her collar. Her work badge still hung around her neck. She had not left yet. I slowed down without meaning to. She looked up when she heard my footsteps. Something in her expression shifted, just slightly, like she had been hoping for company but had not expected it to be me. Still here, I said. She exhaled. Car is in the shop. Transmission gave out this morning. I have been trying to get a ride for the last hour, but the apps are all surging and my usual people are not picking up. I held up my keys without thinking. I can drive you. She looked at the keys, then at me. You sure? I do not want to pull you out of your way. I smiled. If I go home alone, I am just going to stare at my ceiling and pretend I am not thinking about the merge request I forgot to approve. Let me feel useful for once. That got a small laugh. The first real one I had seen from her all day. Okay, she said. Deal. We made a run for the parking garage, both of us laughing by the time we reached my car, shoes soaked, jackets dark with rain. My car is not much to look at. It is a gray 4-door sedan with a scratch along the rear bumper from a parking lot I would rather not talk about. But the heater works and the speakers are decent, and when I started the engine and warm air began filling the space between us, something about the whole situation felt unexpectedly right. We drove through the city slowly, rain heavy against the windshield. Soft music played low. The streets reflected headlights in long orange smears. Neither of us rushed to fill the silence. That was the thing about being around Claire. The quiet never felt awkward. Felt like rest. Thanks again, she said after a while. You keep ending up in these situations because of me. You took me out for tacos when I was having the worst Tuesday of my adult life, I said. I still owe you for that. She smiled, and this time it stayed on her face longer than usual. Maybe we are even then. Maybe, I said. By the time we turned onto her street, the storm had stopped being polite about itself. Wind pushed through the trees hard enough to shake the branches. Water was rushing along both curbs. I pulled up in front of her building and left the engine running, wipers still going. She did not reach for the door handle right away. "You are really going to drive back in this," she said. It was not really a question. "I will be fine," I said. She looked at the rain. Then she looked at me. Then back at the rain. "I have pasta," she said. "And a dry kitchen. And it is genuinely terrible out there. Come up for dinner." She paused. "Just dinner." I turned off the engine. Inside, her apartment was nothing like the office. It was warm and full and lived in. Plants on every windowsill. Books stacked in places that were not quite shelves. A small painting near the door that looked like it meant something personal. It smelled like cedar and something faintly sweet. She handed me a dry hoodie that was slightly too big for me and put me to work chopping vegetables while she handled the stove. We moved around each other in that small kitchen like we had done it before. Bumping elbows, passing things without asking, laughing at nothing in particular. The garlic hit the pan and the whole apartment filled with something that felt like warmth made into a smell. We ate by the window. Rain dragged long lines down the glass. She told me about the town she grew up in. I told her about my first winter in Seattle, how I thought I was prepared for the rain and was spectacularly wrong. She laughed so hard she had to set down her fork. It was the most I had heard her laugh in 2 years. When we finished eating and washed the dishes side by side, I checked the time. It was late. Outside, the storm was louder than ever, not slowing down, not softening. She stood in the middle of her living room looking from the window to the door to me. "You really should not drive in this," she said. Her voice was quiet, careful, like she had been thinking about the next part for a few minutes already. "Why don't you just stay here tonight?" My heart stopped moving for a full second. I met her eyes, nodded. "I will stay." And then, before I could think better of it, the words came out. "But I am not sleeping on the sofa." The room went completely still. Even the rain seemed to pause. She looked at me the way people look at something they are not sure is real yet, searching, waiting, trying to decide what it meant. I rushed to explain. "I just mean the couch looks short. I will take the floor. I will be fine down there." For one long second, her face stayed unreadable. Then she laughed, soft and sudden and real. She grabbed a pillow from the couch and threw it directly at my chest. "You scared me for a second, Jordan," she said. I caught the pillow, my face warm. "I am not that bold," I said. She tilted her head and looked at me in a way I had never seen before. "Not yet," she said, so quiet it was almost just for herself. She pulled out the sofa bed and smoothed the sheets and dropped a folded blanket at the foot without another word. We worked side by side in easy silence, like we did at the office, except this time there were no screens between us. Just warm light and low music and rain outside and something in the air that neither of us was ready to say out loud. She said goodnight and disappeared down the hall. I sat on the edge of the pull-out and stared at the ceiling and listened to the storm. And I thought about how this was the same woman who ran sprints and drove deadlines and never let anything rattle her. But in that apartment, in that light, she felt different. She felt real. And I already knew, lying there in the dark, that something between us had just moved. Quietly, without permission. And there was no putting it back. I did not sleep much. Not because the sofa bed was uncomfortable, though it was not exactly made for someone my height. I did not sleep because every time I got close, my brain replayed that moment. Those words. "Not yet." 2 words she had said so quietly I could have convinced myself I imagined them. Except I did not imagine them. I heard them, and they sat in my chest like something warm that had no business being there. By the time gray light crept through the curtains, I had made a decision. I was going to be normal, professional. I was going to eat whatever she offered, say thank you like a reasonable person, and get to work without making anything strange. I was going to be the version of myself that did not read too much into things. That plan lasted until I walked into the kitchen. The table was already set. Eggs in a pan, toast on a plate, sliced fruit in a small bowl, 2 mugs of coffee steaming beside each other like they had been waiting. Claire stood at the stove in a soft knit sweater and dark jeans, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders. No work badge, no professional distance, just her. Moving around her own kitchen like the morning was something she had decided to enjoy rather than rush through. She heard me and glanced over her shoulder. "You survived," she said. "Barely," I said. "Sit," she said. "Eat." So I did. We talked for a long time over that breakfast. Not about work. Not once. She told me about the small coastal town she grew up in. How everyone knew your name and your business and your grandmother's business. How she left at 18 and never quite stopped missing it, even while she was glad to be gone. I told her about my first apartment in Seattle, a studio so small the bed was 2 feet from the stove, and the winter I thought I understood Pacific Northwest rain and discovered I absolutely did not. She laughed in a way that made her whole face change. Easier. Younger somehow. "You make it look simple," I said at one point. "The job. The pressure. The way you just handle everything." She looked down at her mug for a moment. "It is not simple," she said quietly. "I just stopped letting people see the parts that are not." There was something honest in her voice then. Not sad exactly, just real. The kind of thing a person says when they are tired of performing strength for an audience that has never asked how they actually are. It helps having someone around who does not make things harder. She added without looking up. I did not know what to do with that, so I just nodded and drank my coffee and let the moment be what it was. After breakfast I washed the dishes while she dried them, and then I noticed the cabinet under the sink was not closing right. The hinge was loose and one side was lifting. I crouched down and took a look without saying anything and had it fixed in about 4 minutes using a screwdriver from her junk drawer. When I stood up, she was leaning in the kitchen doorway watching me with an expression I could not fully read. "That was not part of the deal," she said. I shrugged. "It was bothering me." She smiled slowly. "You are dangerous, Jordan. If I had known you fixed things, I would have found an excuse to invite you over sooner." I looked at her. "That sounds like a trap." She smiled wider but said nothing, which was somehow worse. We drove to work together. The storm had cleared overnight and left Seattle looking scrubbed and quiet, puddles on every surface, the air sharper than it had been in days. She had the window cracked slightly and her elbow rested on the door and the radio played low. It was the kind of drive that feels completely ordinary and also somehow like something you are going to remember for a long time. In the parking garage, before we got out, she rested her hand on my arm for just a second. Not long, not dramatic, just a touch that said something she did not put into words. "I liked having you here," she said. Then she got out of the car and walked toward the elevator, and I sat there for a moment before following. I should have known something was coming. I should have felt it. But I was still warm from the morning and I walked into that office completely unprepared. Started small. A look from someone near the coffee station when we arrived at the same time. A comment in the team chat that landed just a little sideways, something about strong working relationships with a winking response underneath it. I brushed it off. By mid-morning I could not brush it off anymore. Conversations lowered when I passed. Someone made a remark during stand-up about people going above and beyond, and a few people laughed in a way that had nothing to do with the project. Claire kept her face steady, professional, unreadable, but I caught the tension in her jaw during the afternoon check-in. The way her hands stayed flat on the table like she was grounding herself. She messaged me just after 4. "Rooftop. Need air." I found her near the railing, arms crossed, looking out at the city. The mist was light and cold. She did not turn around when she heard me approach. "This is getting old fast," she said. Her voice was controlled but tired underneath it. I stood beside her. "I am sorry. I should have been more careful this morning." She turned and looked at me sharply. "We did nothing wrong," she said firmly. "Do not apologize for something that was not a mistake." I held her gaze. "You are right. I just do not want this to cost you anything." Her expression shifted then. Something loosened slightly. She looked back out at the city. "I have worked a long time to be taken seriously here," she said. "Not just as someone's assistant or someone's idea. As the person making the calls. People look for any reason to rewrite the story. Any opening." "I understand," I said. She was quiet for a moment. If it gets louder, she said slowly, I may need to move you to a different team. Just to put space between us officially. My chest pulled tight. I do not want that. She looked at me. Neither do I. So what do we do? I thought about it for only a second. We do not disappear, I said. We do not act guilty for something we did not do. We keep it clean, we keep it professional, and if anyone crosses a line, we name it out loud. She searched my face for a long moment. Then she nodded. Once. Firm. Okay. The next morning she spoke to leadership directly. Calm, clear, no drama. I backed her up in the right places and made sure my work spoke loudly enough that no one could question why I was on her team. Within a few days the comments stopped. The looks faded. People moved on to other things the way office noise always does eventually. But something had shifted between us. Not broken. Not shaken. It had gone deeper. We started texting in the evenings. Nothing significant at first. A photo she sent of a meal she was attempting for the first time, slightly burnt at the edges. A thread we got into about which Seattle neighborhoods were actually worth living in. She asked me once, late on a Tuesday, if I had eaten dinner. I had not. She sent me a recipe with a voice note saying it took exactly 20 minutes and had no excuse not to be made. I made it. It was good. I told her so. She replied with a single line. Told you. And somehow that felt like more than it should have. One Friday evening after a long sprint closed early, she asked if I wanted to grab food. Just food, she said. No storm this time. We went to a small place near the water. Wooden tables, warm light, the sound of rain tapping lightly against the windows outside. Gentle this time. Nothing like that first night. We sat across from each other, and somewhere between the first drink and the second I realized I was not performing anything. I was not being careful or strategic or trying to stay inside a line I had drawn for myself. I was just there. With her. You seem different lately, she said, turning her glass slowly. Different how? I asked. Like you stopped bracing, she said. Like you are not waiting for something to go wrong. I looked at her across the table. Maybe I just got tired of pretending I do not care about things, I said. She held my gaze. Then she nodded, slowly, like I had said something she already knew but needed to hear out loud. When we walked back to our cars that night, the air was cool and damp and the street was quiet. She stopped at her door and turned around. I am glad we are doing this, she said. Doing what exactly, I asked, though I already knew the answer. She smiled. Not rushing. Not pretending. Just being honest about what this is. I drove home thinking about that word. Honest. What it costs. What it opens up. How the two of us had been circling something real for a long time and were only now letting ourselves walk toward it instead of away. And somewhere in the back of my mind, underneath the warmth and the quiet and the way she had smiled at me in that parking lot, a small voice reminded me that what came next would ask more of both of us than a stormy Friday night ever had. She kissed me first. I want to be clear about that, because the way the story could get told, with me fixing things around her apartment and driving her home in the rain, it might sound like I was the one pushing. I was not. I was doing everything I could to hold still. She kissed me first, and it was the most unexpected and most obvious thing that had ever happened to me. But I am getting ahead of myself. The weeks after that dinner near the water settled into something I did not have a word for yet. Not a relationship. Not just friendship either. Something in between that had its own weight and warmth. We moved carefully, both of us aware of how much there was to protect. At work we were steady and professional. She ran her meetings, I delivered my work, and nobody had anything new to say about us. That part felt like a small victory. Outside the office was a different world entirely. She started showing up in the corners of my regular life in ways that felt natural rather than planned. A message on a Sunday afternoon asking if I had been to the new market that opened near the waterfront. An evening where she called instead of texted, and we ended up talking for an hour about nothing that mattered and everything that did. One Saturday she came with me to a hardware store because I needed a specific type of bracket and she claimed she needed to get out of her apartment. She spent 20 minutes seriously debating the merits of two nearly identical shelf brackets, and I stood there watching her and felt something I was not ready to say out loud. It was during one of those ordinary evenings that the ground shifted under us. We were at her apartment on a Wednesday night. No particular reason, no plan, just takeout and a movie neither of us was fully watching. Rain tapped at the windows, softer than that first night, more like a background sound than a weather event. She was sitting with her legs folded under her on the couch, and I was beside her close enough that our arms touched and neither of us moved away. About 40 minutes into the movie, she turned slightly and looked at me. "I almost did not ask you to stay that first night," she said. I looked at her. "Why not?" She took a breath. "Because I was scared. Not of you. Of myself. Of wanting something I did not know how to handle without making a mess of everything I had built." I did not say anything right away. I let her words settle. "What changed?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. "I got tired of being so careful that I stopped letting anything real happen," she said. "I have spent a long time being the person who holds it all together. At work, in my life. I am good at it. But being good at holding yourself together also means you get very good at keeping people at a safe distance without realizing that is what you are doing." I turned toward her on the couch. "You do not have to do that with me," I said. "You never did." She looked at me then in a way that felt different from every other time she had looked at me. Something in it was open, unguarded, like she had finally decided to stop standing behind the glass. I raised my hand slowly toward her face, giving her every chance to lean away. She did not lean away. She leaned in. The kiss was quiet and careful, and when we pulled back we were both completely still for a second, like we needed a moment to confirm it had actually happened. "Well," she said softly, "that answers a question I have been asking myself for a long time." I laughed once, low. "Just one?" She smiled and looked down. "Maybe more than one." We did not rush anything after that. There was no sudden declaration, no dramatic conversation about what we were or what we were going to be. We just let it be real. We kept showing up for each other. She would come by my apartment some evenings and walk around looking at my shelves like she was reading a map of who I was. I cooked more than I had in years because feeding someone else turned out to be something I was quietly good at. She started leaving a coffee mug at my place without commenting on it, which I chose to interpret as a positive sign. But life has a way of interrupting warmth with weight. The email came on a Thursday afternoon. A company-wide message about restructuring, new reporting lines, new leadership layers. Most people skim those. I read every word. One section near the bottom made my stomach drop. Clare Weston was being considered for a senior director position. A significant promotion. One that would place her above multiple teams, including mine. I closed my laptop and sat very still for a moment. She found me an hour later near the windows on the far side of the floor, arms crossed, watching the street below. She stopped beside me and did not say anything for a few seconds. "You saw it," she said. I nodded. She exhaled slowly. "I found out this morning. They told me before the announcement. I have been trying to figure out how to bring it up all day." I turned to look at her. "This is a big deal, Claire." "It is," she said. "And it is complicated." She looked straight ahead. "If I take this role, everything becomes visible in a different way. We would need to be formal about us. HR, documentation, the whole thing. People would look for reasons to question my decisions, and the easiest one to hand them would be you." I watched her face. She was not panicking. She was thinking. There is a difference, and I had learned to tell them apart. "What do you want to do?" I asked. She turned to look at me. "I want the job," she said plainly. "I have earned it. I have wanted it for 3 years. I know you have. And I want this," she said, her voice dropping slightly. "I am not willing to pretend I do not." I reached over and took her hand right there by the windows where anyone could have walked by and seen us. I did not care. "Then we do it right," I said. "We go to HR before anyone else does. We document it properly, we set up new reporting lines, we give people nothing to use against you." She looked at my hand over hers. "That is not the easy road," she said. "No," I said. "But it is the honest one. And you told me once that honest was the only way you knew how to do things that mattered." Something moved across her face then. Recognition, maybe. Or relief. "Okay," she said quietly. "We do it right." I squeezed her hand once and let go, and we walked back to our separate desks like two professional people who had just made a very professional decision. But my heart was going fast the whole way back. That night she sat at her kitchen table with the official offer open on her laptop, and I stood behind her with my hands on her shoulders while she read it through twice. The numbers were serious. The title was serious. The responsibility was significant enough that I felt a wave of pride so strong it surprised me. She leaned back in her chair when she finished and closed her eyes for a moment. "They really want me," she said. "Of course they do," I said. She reached up and put her hand over mine. "We have to be smart about this." "We will be," I said. She opened her eyes and looked at the screen one more time. Then she closed the laptop. "Let's go be smart about it," she said. And somehow that felt like the most romantic thing she had ever said to me. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in an HR meeting I never expected to be in. Across a table from a woman named Leslie, who had a legal pad and a calm expression and the particular energy of someone who had seen every version of this conversation before. She asked how long. Claire and I answered at the same time, then looked at each other, then back at Leslie. "It was recent," Claire said. Leslie nodded and wrote something down. We went through the process carefully. New reporting lines were drawn up so I would no longer sit under Claire's direct oversight. A formal disclosure was filed. Leslie explained what was permissible and what required transparency going forward. It was thorough and a little uncomfortable and completely necessary. When we walked out of that room, Claire exhaled like she had been holding her breath for an hour. "That was not fun," she said. "No," I agreed. "But it is done." She glanced at me sideways as we walked down the hall. "You were very calm in there." "I was terrified," I said. She laughed quietly. "You did not show it." "Years of pretending I am not the newest person in the room," I said. She shook her head, still smiling, and that small moment felt like a reward for the whole morning. The weeks that followed required a different kind of strength from both of us. Claire stepped into her new role with the same quiet power she brought to everything. Except now more people were watching. She ran larger meetings. She spoke in rooms where the decisions were bigger and the stakes were higher. I watched her from across those rooms sometimes and felt a mix of admiration and something close to awe. I switched to a different team as agreed. New colleagues, new rhythms, new expectations. It was harder than I expected. Not because the work was beyond me, but because starting over in a place where nobody knows what you are capable of requires a certain kind of patience I had to build from scratch. There were days when I missed the easy shorthand Claire and I had developed over 2 years of working side by side. But I also proved something to myself during those weeks. That I could stand without leaning. That my career had its own legs. At work we were clean and professional. No inside looks, no lingering after meetings, no behavior that handed anyone ammunition. It was not cold. It felt solid, like two people who understood what they had and respected it enough to protect it properly. Outside work was ours completely. Some evenings were quiet. Cooking together in her kitchen or mine. Music playing low. The city moving outside the windows. Other nights were loud with laughter over old stories or ridiculous debates about things that did not matter at all. I learned that she made terrible tea but excellent coffee. She learned that I could not watch suspenseful movies without narrating what I thought was about to happen, which she found both annoying and endearing according to her. We argued sometimes. Real arguments, not the polite disagreements of two people still performing for each other. Once about something small that turned out to be about something bigger underneath it. Once about a decision she made at work that affected my new team and she had not thought to mention in advance. That one sat between us for a full evening before I said what was actually bothering me, and she listened without defending herself before she responded. We worked through it. Not perfectly, but honestly, and I think that is when I understood what we actually were to each other. Not two people who made everything easy. Two people who made everything worth it. One evening in late autumn, another storm came through Seattle. The serious kind. Wind pushing hard against the glass. Rain coming sideways. We were at her apartment, legs tangled together on the couch, her reading and me looking out at the weather. She set her book down after a while and looked at me. "Do you remember that first night?" she asked. I smiled without turning from the window. How could I forget? She was quiet for a second. "What I remember most is not the rain or the dinner or even the kiss that came much later." She paused. "What I remember is you saying you were not sleeping on the sofa." I turned to look at her then. It was not about the sofa, was it? She said. No, I said. It never was. It was about not showing up halfway. About deciding that whatever this was, I was not going to pretend it was smaller than it felt just because that was easier. She looked at me for a long moment. Her eyes were steady and warm and certain. I spent a long time being careful, she said slowly. Careful with my career, careful with people, careful with anything that felt like it could matter too much. And then you sat on my sofa bed in the middle of a storm and somehow that version of careful stopped working. I reached over and took her hand. Good, I said. She leaned her head against my shoulder and we sat there watching the storm do its worst against the windows. Neither of us spoke for a while. We did not need to. The silence had the particular quality of two people who have stopped bracing and started building. I thought about the night it all began. The lobby, the rain, the keys I held up without thinking. The small apartment, the garlic smell, the pillow she threw at my chest. The 9 words that cracked something open. I thought about the rooftop conversation and the HR meeting and the argument we worked through and every ordinary evening that had quietly added up into something I would not trade for anything. I love you, I said. I had not planned to say it then. It just came out easy and sure, like it had been waiting in a short line. She lifted her head from my shoulder and looked at me. For a moment she did not say anything. She just looked at me the way she had looked at that cabinet hinge the morning I fixed it. Like she was checking that it was real and it was going to hold. Then she smiled. Slow and full and without any reservation at all. I love you too, she said. I have for a while. I was just waiting until it did not scare me anymore. I laughed softly. Does it still scare you? A little, she admitted. But the right things usually do. Outside the storm kept going. Inside everything was steady and warm and exactly where it was supposed to be. She picked her book back up. I turned back to the window. Her feet were tucked under my leg and my hand rested over hers and the rain kept falling the way it always does in Seattle. Steady and certain and not asking permission from anyone. We had chosen each other the right way. Slowly, honestly, with eyes open. And neither of us was going anywhere.